All right, so today has been all about how do we collectively build a city, so not just Grand Rapids, not just Kalamazoo, not just Muskegon, but a region that is economically viable and have a ton of opportunities regardless of race and ethnicity. But also not just opportunity, but how can we really build wealth? And so the panel that I've assembled is going to talk extremely real and open and truthful about the things that need to take place from a community standpoint, from the different lenses that they all have about the tangible things that we can do and must do in order for us as a community to move forward. And so I'm not sure who wants to kind of kick it off. Just overall, I know Dwayne was a part of a very robust conversation during the first breakout session that we had upstairs. So I'm not sure if, kind of some of the ideas and some of the conversation that took place up there, but more focused around what we must do to truly, from a Grand Rapids standpoint, how do we get off the bottom of being 52 out of 52 for the challenges that exist in Kalamazoo, which you shared and you and I have talked about in person and on Facebook. Where do we go and how do we build up our community?
One of my favorite quotes is, if you find a problem, then create a solution to fix that problem. So that's one of the things that we talked about today upstairs was a lot of people are suffering at just your basic need level. Like where can I sleep tonight? Where can I grab something to eat? So you're dealing with multiple levels of Black people, where some are doing well. You have your middle class, and you have some people far too often that are just suffering. So we have to, again, that was part of the conversation earlier today, was we have to find ways to help the basic people, the people with basic needs, meet their needs, whatever it be, like I said, food, shelter, childcare. Find ways to meet just the basic financial needs so people can actually begin to think beyond just today. So that was part of our conversation. Another part was, a sister brought up, and I just wanted to do a little report, a sister brought up that a lot of times politically, Black people aren't engaged because they don't believe in the leadership that's before them. So as we are creating collectivity, we also have to think about being the one to actually answer the call politically. So stepping up and actually running for office, so people that are engaged with the community are actually taking on the fight and becoming politicians. So that's another thing that someone brought up I thought was really, really good, was not enough people that really could be the answer and really engage the community are actually stepping up into these offices. So I heard we got a good brother and some good sisters out here, but we don't have that problem in Grand Rapids. So I'm just saying, but nationally, we need to do more stepping up into these roles and on these boards and becoming active. Those that can become active in your civic duties. So that was part of, like, I know I probably didn't do a good job, but it's like 10, 15 things, but those are some really good points I thought was brought up earlier.
Thank you. Really happy to be here, part of this wonderful, wonderful program. And kudos again to Jamil Robinson and the entire GRAF staff and team. Now, Commissioner, I like to hear myself talk, so if I get out of pocket, out of line, please stop me, take the mic. There's so many different directions I think we could go with this conversation, but two things that I'm highly interested in for the city of Grand Rapids is investing in young people, making sure that there's mentorship and we're nurturing the next generations to take advantage of what the economy is going to look like moving forward, and also identifying opportunities in our neighborhoods and in our city. Grand Rapids is a very prosperous city. It's on the rise. It's overcome deindustrialization, unlike many cities in Ohio and Minnesota and Wisconsin. And even Detroit, for that matter. We've done a really good job of being strategic about bringing the industry that's going to anchor the next 50 to 100 years of the economy here in Grand Rapids. And so kudos to our city and all our elected officials and the geniuses that were a part of being the architects to make that happen. At the same time, we still have about 52% unemployment in the African American community here in the city of Grand Rapids. That's a travesty. And the economic quagmire is the word I'll use for the black community and the brown community for that matter here in this city is not just because people aren't going out and working hard and looking for opportunity. We have to be honest with ourselves and say people are being excluded from opportunities. We have to be honest and say that banks aren't financing African American businesses. They'll give you $30,000 for a car loan, but if you want $10,000 or $5,000 for a business, and I just came from Fifth Third, that's why I was a little bit late getting another business started, there's all the scrutiny in the world for that access to capital. And so we need to be honest with ourselves, take a really hard look in the mirror. We need, some auditing to go on of, financial institutions and even of some of, our city government. We need to look at, and we have fine commissioners here who are doing this work, but we need to look at who's getting contracts. Our African American vendors getting contracts. I did a big event at one of our public institutions not too long ago, and I'm very fond of them, and they're very progressive. But I had to have a conversation with them when I looked at their catering and the restaurants that they work with, because there was nobody of color who, was there to use for my event. And so I'm saying, this is a public institution, we pay taxpayer dollars, but this restaurant list isn't reflective of the community. And so there's some very basic things that we can be doing to ensure that people are getting contracts. There's some very basic things that we can do to make sure that people are included in the mainstream conversation. And I know there's some great conversations going on with the city and some private public partnership stuff that's kind of talking about an ecosystem and making sure that that works for everybody and that it's accessible to everybody. And just being intentional in our communications. We know that this is a hyper-segregated city, so when you're Amway or when you're Steelcase or when you're one of these other giants of industry, when you're sending out your communications about jobs and opportunities where businesses can get in where they fit in, so to speak, that doesn't necessarily reach our communities where we're at, and that's part of being, in a hyper-segregated community. So you need to reach out to Commissioner Lanier when you have communications. You need to be in tune with Joe Jones. You need to, hit up your local neighborhood associations and utilize what's already there. We don't always have to reinvent the wheel. We don't always need a new program. In a lot of ways, we just need to communicate with one another and be more efficient and be more effective.
I too would like to thank Jamil for this opportunity to be here this afternoon, and I actually think that this is exactly the type of thing that we would need to do. Figure out ways to have community conversations around the economic developments that are happening in the city of Grand Rapids and more specifically in the African American community. I believe, and I think some of this has already been said, but I think that we have to be the change that we want to see. And frequently we have conversations and point the finger at who isn't doing something, as opposed to saying, why am I not doing something? Because when you're saying who isn't doing something, you have to include yourself in that. And so as you're pointing and thinking about what isn't happening, think about some of the solutions to those same issues. And you may be the person, or you may be able to tap someone who's the person. Because we can't take on everything and we can't solve every single issue, but figure out the thing that you can solve and be that change, and then make sure that you're encouraging other people to be the other changes. And that's how we're going to move things. The other thing is as soon as you get 5 more cents in your hourly wage, please don't move outside of the city of Grand Rapids. Stay in the city. As a collective, we can do more. We can elect better. Because we're here, we're in one geographical location, and that's where you can create the change because you're in clusters. So, think about those elements. I can remember us having a conversation about someone who was running for school board. This was many years ago. And the next time it was time to have that discussion, that person had moved, had purchased their first home, and was not in the city any longer. And didn't even realize it. Didn't even realize that how that decision had impacted all this work that we had been doing to prepare them for this opportunity. So it's little things like that. Your zip code matters. I think the other thing is we oftentimes talk about supporting businesses, And I think not only should we support businesses, and that's when you frequent and spend your money there, but we also need to promote them. Because if you spend your money there, that's just your money. When you promote them, then suddenly you're encouraging other people to spend their money there as well. And that's gonna do more for that business than if only you supported them. So think about supporting as well as promoting some of the businesses that exist. One of the last things I'll say, and I'll pass the mic because we could talk all day on this one question, but I think the other thing is making sure that you demand, I love what you said about challenging whatever organization that was about the list of caterers. We need to do that all the time. It doesn't matter how much money we're spending. We need to push back on systems that are not respecting us as people. So if that means not going to the same restaurant that you go to all the time, not going to the same church, not going to the same school institutions, push back if they're not meeting your needs. And so if they don't have board members that look like you, if they don't have people at the executive levels that do not look like you, stop supporting. And those small boycotts will start sending the messages. And this happens at the nonprofit level all the way up to corporate. If they don't look like you, they don't deserve to treat you, they don't deserve to care for you, they don't deserve to try and meet any need that you have if they're not willing to have someone there to represent you. Representation matters.
Thank you. I want to also join the panelists in saying thank you to Brother Jamil for the invitation, for the opportunity, and got one announcement, and that's for Dr. Nimbert. I need you to call your family and tell them you're not coming back to New York. Stay here. And if you try to go to the airport and fly out, I know some people, I will have you detained. So just get comfortable. Afterwards, we're going to talk about some realtors to talk to. I'm not going anywhere. I just want to give a shout out to Dr. Nimbert and her vast knowledge that she provided for us on this afternoon. And she spoke of a business model that I think many people would look at as somewhat antiquated, somewhat that, or a business model that could not help to create wealth, but a co-op is about as good as it gets in terms of really, I mean, speaking to what the theory or the belief was back home in Africa, this idea of cooperative economics, right? So it's something that we should pay attention to and really look to see how can we put some wheels to that and make it happen at a greater level here in our beloved Grand Rapids. And so we, as we sit here, I'm sure many of you had the ongoing discussions ever since the 8th of November. It was the evening, 8th of November, well into the morning of November 9th. And the question has consistently been asked, how should we prepare, or better yet, what are we going to do, right? And I want to suggest that regardless of where you fall, what side of the political aisle you fall on, when it comes to the African American community and just historically marginalized communities in general, nothing has changed. The goal is still the same, and that is to position ourselves in our community in a way in which we can work to create wealth. Nothing has changed. I don't care. It doesn't matter who's in the White House. It doesn't matter who controls Congress, right? Now, it might be a tad bit more difficult. I'm not, I wouldn't sit here and say that things might not get more difficult in terms of being able to do those things. But the end game is still the same. And that is for us to create a more equitable economy, a more equitable America, a more equitable Grand Rapids, right? So let's not get too caught up in what's happening in DC, because, one of the reasons I love serving as a city commissioner is because I believe firmly in that statement that all politics are local. I believe that. Because there's only so much that we can do to control what's happening in DC. Wonderful city, right? Love it, right? Can't wait to go and visit the museum. By the way, make sure sometime in 2017 that you go and you spend some time in the new African American Museum of History. But other than visiting it, I've not lost anything in DC. In other words, I'm okay with trying to make change right here where we are. Because there's something about being focused on making change where you are locally, understanding that you could impact what's happening nationally and globally. I once had someone share with me, they prophesied to my life. They told me, they said that you're going to be a world changer. And my first response was, because I didn't have one, I need to go and get a passport. Because I'm thinking, world changer, I'm about to travel, right? Now mind you, I hadn't been on the plane. My first flight was when I was after college, right? And so I'm thinking, big things are ahead, right? But then it dawned on me after talking to many other folks who are much wiser than I am that one can change the world right where they are. Because it's really incumbent upon us to create solutions that can be mimicked locally, that can be mimicked globally, right? And so, I am acutely aware of the data that speaks to us being second to the bottom with regards to African American economic opportunities in Grand Rapids. There's a couple ways to look at that. One is, there's nowhere to go but up, right? We could drop down one more slot, but I'm feeling that there's nowhere. The direction in which we can go is up. I'm also very much aware of the fact of where we are, the culture of where we are, right? And there's some tension there, and there's a lot of irony there because we live in a community, we live in a region that prides itself on entrepreneurship, family business, economic self-sufficiency, the ethos of work, right? And yet those things don't seem to necessarily show themselves or avail themselves to folks who are historically marginalized. I am what you would call an eternal optimist, but I'm also a realist. And I believe that we live in a world-class city with significant resources. And it really is a matter of operating at a much more strategic level to get to a place where we can benefit more, where we can have a more equitable life because of the economics that are at play. And I'm believing that we have the firepower locally, in terms of the intellect, in terms of the energy level, all of those things, I think we have it here. I think the one thing that's missing, and it's not something that's just occurring here in Grand Rapids, is this lack of connectivity that really gets to the point of, it really doesn't matter who's up front and who's in back, who's the spokesperson and who's not. Until we get to a place where we can realize it really doesn't matter, right? I think we're going to continue to have the struggle that we have, right? And so I am, again, with the resources that we have in this town intellectually, with the resources that we have in town financially, again, the vast majority of it being something that we don't possess. The one thing that we do possess is the power to control a narrative. And I'm going to tell you something right now. I'm believing that there were many folk who have tremendous influence in our city who were embarrassed about that Forbes list. Now, they're not going to write an article about it. They're not going to have a press conference about it. But that's embarrassing because we're a world-class city. There was a gentleman by the name of Peter Wegge who is no longer with us. He was a longtime philanthropist. And he said his goal, his vision was for Grand Rapids to be the premier medium-sized, the best medium-sized city in the country. So the will is there. It might not be across the board, but I know that a lot of what's happening right now in our community is an embarrassment. And so it's really a matter of finding who are those who are embarrassed enough to want to change the dynamic and begin to disrupt some things. Because if disruption does not occur, we're going to keep on getting what we get.
something else, man. I appreciate you guys for definitely joining the panel. I love this. This is that cloth talk that the young folks say. I'm still young. This is that cloth talk. We need this. This is almost as good as a sermon on Sunday. So, I believe, Grab believes, that there are 3 activities that we should focus on in order to create change within our communities. Not just here, but regionally and also across this country. It's around economic development in the Black community with a focus on industry creation. It's also high impact transformational community education. That's a lot. So it has to be transformational and not just impactful, because right now everyone in this room is being impacted, but it's not transforming the way things are taking place in the places and spaces that we occupy. So we have to begin to look at education from a transformational standpoint, to where when one cup, so it's pretty much like the cascading water, so we have to stack all the glasses. So if we pour on the cups at the top, does all of the glasses fill up? So the goal is to get all these glasses to fill up. So it has to be transformational to where it doesn't just stop with just that select few. And then also it's around mobilizing and organizing the residents within these neighborhoods, within these communities. So speaking from those lenses around industry creation, where there's opportunity. So I tell some of the young people that I work with, if someone said, Jamil, you can make $1 million a day selling nails, I'll be selling nails tomorrow. So it's not necessarily about just seeking out those things that we're passionate in, but it's also seeking out opportunity and trying to figure out how to align passion with opportunity. Then also around community education. So we have horrible statistics when it comes to economics, but we also know that those also exist within our neighborhoods, where we have 53% unemployment, where in Grand Rapids we have 45% poverty. How do we transform the education? So the schools do their part. The neighborhood does their part. But we all can do our part to become a lot better than what we're currently doing. And so it has to be a neighborhood-led and also accepted change and disruption in the educational system. And then how do we organize and mobilize residents? Because it's a plenty of conversations that take place. I'm at the barbershop, I'm at the gas station. People are just having regular conversations around, as Fannie Lou Hamer said, sick and tired of being sick and tired. But it stops right there. So how do we begin to mobilize those people? What is the tipping point for people who are marginalized and oppressed to actually move into action? So, speaking to those things, what are some of the suggestions? What are some of the things that you've seen happening? What are some of the things that you started that you begin to see incremental change? So we're not saying that we go 0 to 100, but can we at least go 0 to 2? Mm-hmm. So what are some of the things that you've seen, that you've done, that can bring about some of this these activities that we need around economic development, community, and organizing?
So that's yeah, man, that's heavy, man, all that you just said right there. One thing.
We don't know what the question is.
I'm gonna pick out a piece list and address it. One entity that I've started recently that I've been extremely excited by with a partner, AJ Hills, the fourth, was nominated for a Grab Award tonight at our prize. Hope everybody comes out to that. Is the Midwest Tech Project, and we're mentoring young people, young men right now, and we'll expand to young women next year to the tech industry, the different opportunities within the tech workforce, and hopefully to become tech entrepreneurs. When you talk education, I think there's a grand opportunity in Grand Rapids, right, to connect all of these different wonderful forward-thinking companies like your Open Systems Technologies, your Atomic Objects, the IT department over there at Spectrum Health. Connect the tech world to Grand Rapids Public Schools and other schools here in the area. Tech is really going to make up a large percentage of the workforce moving forward. The efficiency of the internet is ruthless, and so a lot of the jobs that, even the malls have been affected. I mean, I remember the former CEO of the Urban League telling me a story about how he had some difficulty with the machines over there at Myers, right? Just, putting the money in there, and I'm looking at that and saying, those are really taking jobs. I worked at Myers, I was in the back, I unloaded the trucks, but for those who are cashiers, you know, that's a job, right? You know, so the service industry is being impacted, manufacturing is being impacted. We had a robotics expo about 3 weeks ago at Martin Luther King Elementary, and robotics and automation is completely changing the game as far as manufacturing goes. So you're not going to be, you know, working in the factories as so much. You're designing the code for the robots that are working in the factories, and or you're maintaining those robots that are doing the factory work. And we want to be the ones, you know, creating these robots. We want to be the ones, you know, creating the code for these robots. There's a whole new industries being created every day by, you know, by tech and by the knowledge of, you know, being able to do that. And so merging that expertise with our Grand Rapids Public Schools would be a great way to start making an immediate impact, because it's where jobs are going to be created. You know, our grandparents worked in Steelcase, if you're here in Grand Rapids, or Ford or GM, and now, you know, you're going to need to be an engineer, you're going to need to be a coder, and these people get paid very well, and they're starting their own businesses off of that. So I think there are a lot of ways to make an impact. Also, I think from a neighborhood level, we have to realize the gold mine that we're sitting on in Southeast Grand Rapids and some of the Black and brown communities. Granville Avenue is a hub. You see a lot of different Latino businesses on either side. These are very walkable neighborhoods. You have Cesar Chavez Elementary next to the Art Center, next to the Hispanic Center, all these different wonderful community institutions building the fabric of the community over there. And we need to duplicate the same thing over here on the Southeast side. When you look at Franklin and Eastern, I know this young lady is from New York, that can be Harlem for Grand Rapids. You know, we're gonna be hyper-segregated. That is what it is. It's gonna take years to try to, you know, kind of overcome that aspect of things. But what we can do is make sure that wealthy doesn't become completely whitewashed, right? So Franklin and Eastern, wealthy is great, and my house is across the street from the Wealthy Theater, and I've benefited from the gentrification, but let's call it what it is. It's gentrification. All the historic Black businesses, with the exception of pretty much one, are out of that area. I go to a lot of the different businesses in that community, and there are very few who are employed who look like the people who grew up with me on Sherman Street, right around the corner from it. You know, the Baxter community isn't benefiting from the, you know, the boom that's going on Wealthy Street, and you know that's happening all over the city. And a part of it is that Grand Rapids is very desirable, and people are recognizing the opportunities in cities again, and some of the indigenous population did not, but now we see what you can do when, you know, you put your mind to it, when you organize, when you make sure that, you know, your communities, you know, are safe, and, you know, and when you have a little bit of intentionality. And so I think we need to be looking at Franklin and Eastern, Kalamazoo and Hall, the Burton area, you know, Alger Heights, different places on the southeast and southwest side, and figuring out, okay, this is going to be a highly dense, populated neighborhood. How can I take advantage? What kind of business will work? What kind of business do I want to be next door to? And get things going. And then come see Jamil, come see the Urban League, see Link, the different places that incubate businesses. You don't always have to reinvent the wheel. We do have things in operation now. And find out where you get your startup capital. Find out where you can get the resources you need in order to, you know, make your business sustainable and be an asset to that neighborhood. And then the last key part is making sure we get young people in those businesses to be apprentices and to be mentored. The culture of entrepreneurship is what's going to drive the day, continually drive Grand Rapids forward, and we need more of that. We can't have enough of that. So if that's cloth talk for you, that's what I'm going for, I guess, and what I get out of Jamil's question is, those are three strategies. One, education and being forward thinking. You know, two, identifying the gold mine as far as real estate and walkability in neighborhoods. And then three, making sure that we are including our young people in this conversation at the earliest ages possible, expose them and nurture them, and help them to start things of their own.
He took a big part of mine, so you stole it. I wanted to say, I think that what he was saying is that we need to empower young people. And I think a lot of times we think of young people as in like in elementary school or middle school or in high school, but what about young professionals, right? Or young people that's in their 20s and their early 30s, right? I give you an example is, I was interested in economic development and just started to do some grassroots on my own, didn't know who to connect with, and one of my mentors so happened to be here today. I want her to raise her name, Maddie Jordan. Please raise your hand, Miss Maddie. She is little and fierce. So Miss Maddie seen that I was very passionate about economic development and just pulled me along, just straight pulled me along, started bringing me into meetings. And that empowered me to get in around different circles and introduce myself to different people and have different types of exposure and experience. A year and a half later, I'm one of the economic developers for the city of Kalamazoo. So like, that is, I think what we need to do is empower people, young people in all forms, in all ages, and give them those experiences, whether it be in business, whether it be in politics, whatever it is, we have to pull someone along with us. And that is something that is not happening at the level that it needs to. Whether it be, like I said, a lot of business owners, as Kevin Ford said earlier, are reaching that age where they can no longer handle the business and maybe they don't have children. But who have you groomed to take that business on? Who have you seen in the community that loves what you do, that you can say, hey, come here, work for a minimum amount, and we'll see what we can do. I think that transfer of knowledge and experience is very important to empower the next generation, because if we don't do that, you're going to have a drop off and people will have to start all over again. And a lot of wealth will be lost. So I encourage all of us who have some type of knowledge, some type of experience, some type of expertise to think about who is in our circle that we can pull along with us to empower them, so when we are gone, that we know that the torch is not just taken but actually uplifted. So I want to thank my mentor and encourage you all to do what she did, was just pull somebody along, and you never know who you might empower to really do something great.
So again, I'm not exactly sure what the question is. It was like 12, but
Pretty much, what are 3 ways in which, or strategies that you have seen work or would like to try, given the fact that what we've already tried to a large part,
specific to education.
specific education or
Okay.
economic development or organizing?
Okay, so yeah, see, it's still 12 questions, but okay. I'm messing with you.
Just three.
So in the city of Grand Rapids, a few things that we've done in recent years is to have candid conversations about just about the fact that within the next 5 to 7 years, we'll lose half of our workforce. And what we have done is we've made it a priority to diversify the workforce of the city of Grand Rapids. And so right now we're doing a lot of recruitment because we know we're going to lose people. And so what we know is that we're going to end up spending more money over the course of a few years as we're overstaffed. I'm thinking about, I don't have an umbrella. I don't know if you know. All the ladies in the room are like, no, this is not happening. I was distracted, I'm sorry. So those are some of the things that we're doing to try and, so that we can make the impact that we want to see. We want the city of Grand Rapids' workforce to look and mirror the community, and right now it just doesn't. It mirrors the community and what the community looked like probably 40 years ago as opposed to where it is now. That's just the fact. We have begun expanding some of our zones, so we now have smart zone within some of the neighborhoods, because this is Brad, we're talking specifically about Black businesses. I'll talk about Black communities, and so we've expanded the smart zone, which actually just kind of helps to attract different types of businesses into the Black neighborhood. So we've done that. We have also expanded some of our districts where we can receive tax increments, again, so that we can build businesses and have revenue. It's kind of like what you see downtown with the DDA and how they are able to capture taxes, and downtown looks amazing. We're trying to do that in the neighborhoods, and so there are SIDs that exist to try and capture that, where you can do those same beautification type projects in the neighborhoods. And so we've expanded into 5 different neighborhoods on the southeast side the city of Grand Rapids so that we can begin trying to do some of the duplicative things that are happening downtown in neighborhoods, because that's, again, what people say frequently. We want to look like downtown, just a miniature. We want to look like we're thriving. We want to look like businesses exist. We want to look like, we want to be walkable neighborhoods, and so we're trying to produce that. Excuse me, and then the other one is, we are beefing up our community engagement. We have set foundational rules that says developers, you are no longer able to go into communities and do whatever you want to, even though you may own the property, without having meaningful engagement with the citizens who live in those neighborhoods. This is new for us. So when I came on the commission, I remember probably in the first, this was 3 years ago, in the first probably 60 days, I had signed off on maybe $25 million of a whole lot of different developments, 15 million here, 5 million there, 2 million here, and the developers were developing a lot of market rate units, so those are the ones that nobody can afford. Well, I don't know how they can afford, but they were there, and most of those units are downtown, and I started asking questions about, okay, what do we have in place that tells us where we need market rate, where we need affordable units, and where do we need low-income units? And we didn't have an answer to that in the city of Grand Rapids. And that was a concern for me, because it's not so much that I'm anti-market rate, because I think that there is a need for that. And I am from the city, and we do like to generate taxes, so I see the benefit in that. But I don't necessarily believe that we need to be able to give tax breaks to all developments that exist in our city. And so to have some meaningful dialogue about who's eligible to receive those tax breaks. So those are some of the things, accountability alongside of that. But most importantly is making sure that strong neighborhoods welcome what they want and get rid of what they don't want. If we don't want a Family Dollar, we just don't want one. So this isn't what you can build in this community, but these are some of the things you can build. And so trying to give people the voice that they need in order to see the change that they want right in their neighborhood. So those are just a few things. You know that I touch on?
Great job,
And that's all education, making sure people are educated, because I see education is beyond K-12.
Yes.
Nelson Mandela said education is the most powerful weapon that you can use to change the world, and it doesn't have to only happen within those buildings with someone standing in front of you giving some information to you. You can be educating people by mentoring them. You can be educating people by making sure that they're aware of what's happening right next door.
Can I say one more thing before you? Just one little caveat. Another piece that we are working on in the city of Kalamazoo is to create a streamlined. What we recognize in Kalamazoo is a lack of, especially minorities, but even in general, a lot of skilled trade are also retiring and getting out of the business. And during the recession, a lot of the skilled trade businesses went under. So now you have these huge conglomerates that are charging whatever they want, because there's not a lot of competition. So what we're working on in the city of Kalamazoo is to create a complete pipeline from high school, educating early on the opportunities in skilled trade. So for the next 20, 30 years, we're not running out of skilled trade laborers as well as business owners. And that's a lot of opportunity at the city of Kalamazoo. I'm sure Grand Rapids has something similar where they have to do a certain amount of contracts. The city has to do a certain amount of contracts with minority businesses. Unfortunately, there's not enough minority businesses in Kalamazoo to actually fulfill some of these contracts, so they just give them to whoever. But there's a lot of opportunity for small businesses and to grow into large businesses in skilled trades, and that's something we're working on right now in Kalamazoo.
And I can just piggyback on that and say, so if your uncle is picking up trash and he has that side business, legitimize him so that he can start getting contracts. That's the piece that we miss. We have all these side hustles, we have all the skills, the uncle that's fixing all the cars, and at night he does it at night so nobody can tell he's doing it. Let's give him the right tools that he needs. Close garage door, let's give him the tools that he needs. This is when you can invest, going back into cooperative, that discussion about if he doesn't have the money to do it, and you have a few more pennies, drop it so that he can get the resources that he needs, so that he can have a legitimate business, so he can come to the city of Grand Rapids, where we do want to see more and more minority contractors so that they can get contracts, and then he'll forever be in your debt.
it's been talked about, this idea of creating opportunities for small business. Allow me to throw something out there that I believe is sometimes overlooked, and that is, and this is not a knock, but we must understand that not everyone is cut out to be an entrepreneur. Can I get a witness? Right? So that's okay. Right? Because here's the thing, we need a workforce, and we need those who can help to develop a workforce, right? Or create or provide for a workforce. And so that's something, and so the Urban League, the space that we're trying to occupy really has to do with, Brother Ford brought it up from the previous panel, brother from Kalamazoo. We are very much in line with this idea, this belief that, you know, there are a number of long-standing businesses that have existing customers and revenues. And they have children, it's a family-owned business, they have children who do not want to be in the family business. And so what happens is that business will usually just go out of business, or if it's attractive enough, they'll get picked up by, you know, another larger competitor. I want to suggest, and this is the thing that I'm working on, in fact, one of the brothers in which I'm working on it with is here, is Brother Andrew Sims, who's with the Michigan Minority Supplier Development Council. And this whole idea of going after existing businesses that are owned, that are not owned by people of color, that have an existing revenue stream, that have a customer base, and looking to buy those companies. I'm gonna tell you something right now. Right now in our town, there's a family-owned business. It's Ace Hardware. Riley's Ace Hardware. I'm gonna tell you something. Joe Jones wants. I want a hardware store. If I had an opportunity right now to get my hands on one of those Riley's, I would take it. Right? I don't know a thing about hardware. All I know is they have a wonderful business model. Right? They position themselves in the market to where not everybody wants to go and have to spend a half an hour to go from one end of the store to the other for some of the big box developments, right? They're local, they play that to the hilt, right? But there's something to be said about this idea.
They're a co-op.
And they're a co-op, right?
It's like the supplier for them.
Correct.
It's a second level co-op.
Yes.
All the independent hardware stores own ACE to do all their marketing and distribution.
Awesome opportunity. Now, the Riley family, okay, the Riley family, they're a white family, right? Again, the moment that Mama and Papa Riley say we's tired and the kids don't want it, if I'm still around, I want Riley's Ace Hardware, right? Right? And I won't change the name, I won't change any of the face, I won't change nothing.
There you go.
Right? There's something to be said about us getting our hands on things that are already successful, right? I said it earlier, we are in the epicenter of family-owned businesses right here, West Michigan. And last I checked, no one lives forever, right? And so eventually they're gonna wanna get out of the business, and you have more and more young people who don't wanna have anything to do with the business, right? I think there's myriad opportunities there for communities of color. And so this idea again of not being so focused on business ownership, but also recognizing that there are opportunities that we can get as employees, where we can open up opportunities for small business owners of color, whether it be in purchasing, whether it be in HR, you name it, right? So we have to keep that in mind. Third thing I want to focus on is this whole idea of creating this mindset. You know, Brother Powell, I love the fact that your mentor's here. If it's one thing that you get out of today, my hope is that you will leave here with a greater desire or with a sense of urgency with regards to availing yourself to someone who's much younger than you, that in which you can provide is what success looks like. The fact that they look like you and that you're successful. There's something to be said about being present in the life of someone and showing them what success looks like. I don't think we have enough of that going on in our town. And if I could, I try in my own sly way to engage some of the very successful people of color in our town to come back, right, and to engage. Just simply be present. Ain't got to say a word. Because for a lot of us, we had that advantage. Growing up, we saw people, I grew up in the D. All I saw, all my success that I saw, looked like me. And so, at a very early age, it was hammered into my head that I could do anything and be anything, right? One other thing I want to mention, Kalamazoo is, how far is Kalamazoo from here? 40 minutes. 40 minutes, right?
I drive fast.
Okay, yeah, you're real fast, but and Muskegon is about 35, 40 minutes, right? Check this out, the sooner that you and I can begin to look through a regional lens, the better. See, things change when you look at things through a regional lens. The numbers aren't that, daunting when you look at the communities of color from a regional perspective compared to a city perspective, or even a metropolitan perspective. And so I get excited about the idea, you make mention that there aren't too many businesses owned by folks of color in Kalamazoo. Same can be said for Grand Rapids, but if you put the two together, along with Muskegon, all of a sudden you have this ecosystem, but it's regional. You know what? I'm a city commissioner, but every day, all day, all I want to do is blur the lines. And that's probably a bad word for some people because I have a certain ward that I represent. But when I think about community, when I think about opportunity and development, blurred lines. Yes, there's Kentwood, there's Wyoming, there's Grand Rapids. No, it's a blurred line. No, right? We need to begin to look at economics through a regional perspective, which means that we have to avail ourselves and spend some time and build relationships in those other cities and not just be so focused on Grand Rapids.
But to that point, real quick before you jump in, let's make sure we support all 150 businesses that are on Grab's website right now that you may be unfamiliar with. We have businesses right now that we need to be supporting with consistency, spending our dollars. Like Commissioner Lanier eloquently put, we need to be promoting them. I think, because people always say, well, where are the black businesses? There's plenty of black businesses in our city, and we need to make sure that they're receiving adequate support.
One quick thing that kind of what he said. I actually met with a business broker last week, and to jump on what he said in the arena of actually buying an existing business, only 1 out of 4 actually get bought. So the opportunity for African Americans to buy existing businesses is extreme, especially if we're thinking cooperatively, right? The problem is too far off, and I'm looking at my pocket saying, I can't afford that, right? But if me, Jonathan, and Jamil get together and say, okay, well, now, for one, we're a lot more bankable at that moment as well, right? Because we're looking at all 3 of our assets. So we all own homes. We could all leverage our homes need be. You know what I'm saying? So we have to think about not just what we want to do individually, but what can we accomplish together.
All right, give it up to our panel. Thank you.